With Danielle Smith announcing changes to Alberta's healthcare as well as the future of their pension plan, many questions are in the air about Alberta's future as a whole. We'll discuss it here with Marty up north. Let's get into it.
Oh, yeah!
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to The Fringe. Now, the state of Alberta is something that we've definitely talked about a lot of times on the show. We have interim premier, or I guess full-time premier, I should say. I was used to saying interim because of last year's situation with Jason Kenney leaving. But Premier Danielle Smith will be joining us here on the channel next week to talk about things like the Alberta pension plan, as well as the state of oil and gas and the carbon tax debacle that's going on in Canada. One person that really has a great perspective that I've always valued the opinion of that I want to bring onto the show today, good old friend of the channel, Marty up north. Well, Marty's going to join us to talk about a couple of those subjects. Marty, how you doing?
Derek, good. How are you, man?
Good. It's always nice to have you on. It's great to have you back. Alberta pension plan. You had a wonderful tweet about this not too long ago when we were talking about the announcement of the plan, and you did a very large explanation as to what you've contributed versus what the average person would contribute, and then what you were getting back versus the average person, and why Alberta pension plan would be better for Albertans. And there's been a lot of pushback in the province of seniors that say, hey, keep your hands off my pension. I feel like that's a lot of fear. People don't like change, but what's your perspective on the pension?
Well, first of all, you know, it's a difficult subject. It's some, you know, most Canadians I find are not very well versed in financial matters, investments, things like that. And you know, the topic of pension started coming about recently, and one thing that I found fascinating was that I in my day-to-day travels, I met people who really didn't understand the pension. In fact, they so misunderstood it that, you know, I met a person who said something about, you know, I'm looking forward to retiring and getting my pension. And I know this person, and, you know, I'm not going to give her name, but I said, you know, hey, you never worked a day in your life, so you're not getting a pension. And this person was mystified by that. I'm like, so that, you know, that really highlighted to me that people didn't understand pensions. So I wanted to talk about pensions when I did the tweet. Now, you know, a couple of things, first of all. So yeah, there's a Canada pension plan, and the Canada pension plan is doing okay. But now Danielle's talking about, you know, taking some of our money out of that pension plan and creating our own Alberta pension plan. And I'm all about that. So, you know, I got to be straight with you. I think you know this, and your viewers perhaps know this, but Marty's a bit of a separatist. Marty's tired of the way, you know, Alberta's being treated in Confederation. And so, you know, I believe that starting to, you know, distance ourselves from Ottawa and gaining a little more independence and putting some walls between us and Ottawa are important things. So, and the pension plan is one of those things. So taking control of our future. Now and so I'm in favor of doing that. I'm also in favor of doing it because I don't like the way, you know, I don't necessarily like the way Ottawa's managing the pension. And to be genuinely honest, I'm worried that the pension might not even be in Ottawa. Like, technically speaking,
right?
You know, as workers, we contribute money our whole working career, and then it's collected by the government, and it's supposed to be kept in a separate account at arm's length. Well, the state of finances of the Canadian federal government are so poor. You know, we're talking a government that's $1 trillion or more in debt, and so I'd love to see the money is there for myself. I'm not actually sure it's there. So even if it's there, bringing it into Alberta probably makes sense, because to be honest, I trust Albertans more than I trust Ottawa. I absolutely don't trust Ottawa. So, you know, with those things in mind, so I agree. And then I wanted to demystify the pension a little bit, and I wanted to talk about it because so my tweet, the tweet that perhaps you're thinking about, is I gave a personal example. I gave my own personal example, and anybody can do this. We can all go to the website, you know, to the My Service Canada account, and you can click on it and see what you've contributed and what you would theoretically get at age 60 were you to retire. And I wanted to show people who are panicking that you shouldn't You shouldn't be. I hope you're not counting on the Canada pension as your only source of pension. That's what I wanted to say
Right.
to people, because, as a guy who's contributed almost the maximum his entire life for whatever 32 years, if I retire tomorrow, I get like $780 a month. That's like,
Right.
that's $8,000 a year. And then you have people now that are panicking over what Danielle's doing, and to be honest, some of those people that are panicking, they're kind of on the socialist side, and they're not even going to get anywhere near that amount. So, and the reason I brought that up, and I'm glad you're mentioning it, is politics are dirty, but one of my strategies in politics is to bring facts to the discussion. And so the facts that, in summarizing everything I've just said all along, I think Ottawa's I'm worried about Ottawa managing. It makes sense, no matter what, for Alberta to manage and guide it ourselves. Do we want the money in Ottawa being managed by them and invested in weird ideas like green energy and stuff like that, or do we want to give it direction as Albertans? I favor that. Hopefully, we'll get better returns. Well, not hopefully. I mean, I think as Albertans will get better returns because we over contribute to the pension compared to the rest of Canada.
Right.
And I'm sorry, I've been rambling. I mean, it's obviously
no, that's okay.
Yeah.
You know what? You make a fair point, and it's actually one I wanted to bring up with you, because a lot of people, when I first announced that I'd be sitting down with Danielle to talk about the pension plan, one of my viewers in the comments said, "Could you ask her what safeguards are going to be put in place to ensure that we don't see kind of the same behavior with an Alberta pension plan that we've seen or have fears about with the federal money that's sitting out there?" And again, you brought that up, that you're questioning if it's even there. What would you like? I know Danielle's done a lot to protect a lot of her policies by saying people are going to vote via referendum. Your taxes aren't going to increase without voter referendum. I know she's talking about the same kind of things when it comes to healthcare, when she gets that going in the way, and we're going to get to that in a little bit.
It's a great it's a great
what do you
question.
think we're going to do?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, like I said, the way it's written right now, for instance, the Canada Pension Plan is an arm's length account from the federal government. What's to protect it from the so would Alberta be any different? In theory, no. Alberta would set up its own pension and have its own arm's length, but it comes down to past behavior and past examples. And so in the present moment, I would trust Danielle to do the right thing. Look at what she did, for instance, when she passed the recent law saying that any future tax hikes would have to be voted by referendum. So she is putting those kinds of, she's a libertarian, but the question then becomes what happens after Danielle if she's not there? And I think Albertans so we can set up those kinds of rules. I think we could set up better rules than Ottawa has. We could put rules that would allow everyday Albertans to confirm that the money's there, to confirm that the guidance comes from the politicians. I don't have very specific answers, but I would say Alberta, I still trust Alberta more than I trust Ottawa. I mean, I absolutely don't trust Ottawa based on things they've done recently. So, the other example I recently, I like what Danielle did with, remember a couple months ago when, was it Justice Germain that had ruled that, there was a couple of plaintiffs who brought a case to the court, and here in Alberta, the laws, the COVID mandates were deemed illegal.
Yes.
And I remember being in favor of that and thinking that was a win for us. And some people said, oh, no, that's not a win, because now politicians will know how to close that loophole. But Danielle just fixed that loophole, and Danielle fixed the loophole, returning the power to the public. So Danielle's always doing that. And I think that's, I don't know how to entrench that in Alberta. I mean, should Alberta have its own constitution that starts with the words "we the people"? I'd love that, so something that gives a guidance to all future governments that it's always "we the people." I don't know if I'm answering your question. It'll be interesting. Ask it of Danielle. Ask it of Danielle.
No, certainly. I certainly don't expect you to have an answer. I just figured, what your take would be. But I think so. Danielle, for me, and I've said it before, even on live streams, that I've never been more proud of where my vote has gone in terms of who it supports, whether it's federal, municipal, or provincial. Now, and that's also for somebody who voted. The first time I voted was for Ralph Klein, back in the '90s. So I mean, I think she's doing a bang up job, and I'm not just saying that because she's coming on the show. I think she's done a great job for Alberta, and she's showing a lot of what Alberta used to stand for. And in terms of prosperity, hard work paying off for its people. But a lot of people, when I talk to them again outside of videos, when I'm sharing opinions with people, a lot of people talk about things like NGOs and, well, she's like every other politician. If you think there's no money being hidden or deals being done, and I've said, look, people got to do business. This
Yep.
is a province where we're saying we're open for business, and
Yep.
you're never going to do anything that's going to make anybody like everyone happy at the same time. But I think on the grand scale of things, she's done a fantastic job so far that I'm looking forward to the next 3 years to see what she can bring
Yeah, no,
forward
no.
for the people.
I mean, Canada right now, to me, Canada is a dumpster fire. Like every
Mhm.
day, I see another scandal and another thing that makes me shake my head. But I
Right.
take comfort in the fact that I currently live in Alberta and we've elected Danielle Smith. So, and
Right.
she is doing the right things. But I'll be honest. Marty says, like, I'll say I don't trust any politician, and somebody say including Danielle, I go including Danielle. So she's doing the
Mhm.
right thing, and she's gotten my vote of confidence right now. But
Yes.
behind the scene, Marty doesn't trust any politician. It doesn't matter
Right.
who they are, Marty. I don't trust any politician. So and yeah, but she's shown some maturity, and she shows her true libertarian side right
Yep.
now, balancing it. What's the example that people say? She's like that new she's driving that new car and trying to figure out how sensitive the brakes and the gas are and things like that, and
Yes.
she's
That's a
doing a
good way of
great
looking at it.
she's doing a great job. But I can
Yep.
sense that she's a libertarian, and I consider myself a libertarian, so I do like what she's doing right now. There's no ifs, ands, or
Right.
buts. I mean,
Right.
I don't have a lot of things I can criticize her. I have
Right.
one thing, and when she comes out, you can ask her this. I mean, I'm still not. She's cleaning a house at Alberta Health, and I think we
Yep.
want to talk about that. But
Yep. That's a good segue.
she's cleaning house. But to me, there's actually people in that were acting almost criminally, and I want some accountability. So am I gonna, and I don't know if in Canadian politics we ever truly get accountability. So do I have to just be happy with the cleaning of house for now? I guess I have to be, but I'd sure like more accountability. I think there was some, people who did bad by us, and shouldn't be just pushed out of the way. I hope that when she cleans house at Alberta Health, that she's not giving big packages to people. I hope they're getting fired with cause, and that's it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, and that was one of my top concerns, because when we look at the province, there's roughly 25,000 provincial employees.
Yeah.
And we're looking at, out of that, maybe, I don't know, in terms of healthcare, like high ups, maybe 250 high ups, and these are jobs that essentially, like, we're talking layoffs when everything moves forward. With Danielle's dismantling, I guess. I've always had a gripe when it comes to the healthcare system in terms of, I have a friend who works for AHS.
Yeah.
She's an RN, and she says, look, the hospitals are understaffed. They're underutilized. They don't have the right resources or product or supplies, I should say, not products, but and she says anytime money comes into the system, it's always going to the high ups. It's going to their bonuses. It's going to research projects that are padding pockets of friends of the government, friends of left leaning governments, we'll say, because I know there's ties to QP and things like that, but there are worries that with such a strong support. I mean, we've seen in the last election how many votes, especially Edmonton, went to the NDP, and a lot of people are saying that with Danielle, she's got a lot more she has to do to convince those voters to come back
Oh,
over to this
the
side of the fence.
NDP is still polling strongly. I mean, the results of the election in May was almost a 50-50 split between
Yes,
NDP and Conservatives, and it's still sitting that way 6 months in. So, yeah, her opponents in the unions, I mean, look at Gil McGowan this week. Apparently he's got the ear of Chrystia Freeland, and
yeah,
so are the unions in Alberta powerful? Yeah. Are the bureaucrats powerful? Absolutely.
right.
But what was the question? I mean,
Well, so I was more going to say, like, with the amount of employees that work within Alberta Health Services throughout the province,
Yeah.
with the dismantling of Alberta Health Services and a restructuring, so to speak. A lot of people think this is us moving into privatized healthcare. And I've seen, now I don't believe that, but that's
Yeah.
what the consensus is online. But I mean, do you think this is going to rock the boat for Danielle in her next election?
No, I think so. Actually, this is a good question or good discussion. This is a topic that comes up a lot, right? Reorganizing, and it doesn't mean necessarily firing everyone,
Mm-hmm.
and like I really don't think that has to be the case. I think reorganizing has to be becoming efficient, and getting, reorganizing means you and I get value for our tax dollars, but it doesn't mean we
Yep.
have to lay off people. Like,
Right.
when I see, yeah, so sticking to Alberta Health, even as an outsider, I'm like you, I hear stories that just frustrate me. And then once in a while, I witness it firsthand when I go to the
Right.
hospital for whatever reason. I'm an engineer by training, so my automatic way of thinking is give me any project, any office, any system, and I'll improve it by 10% with almost no effort. And so when I look at something like Alberta Health, I'd be drooling if I had the opportunity to see what's truly going on. And so I
Right.
think we can make changes without affecting the individual's salary. Certainly, here's an example. I mean, I have a friend who's an ambulance driver. And we've all
Mm-hmm.
heard of the nightmares of like the ambulance drivers in Calgary having to pick up like people that are overdosing all the time, right? And so,
Yes.
and he was telling me that he was wasting hours all the time because he would drive his ambulance, go to the hospital, bring a patient who had almost overdosed that everybody knew, and he couldn't even leave the patient there. He has to wait for a
Right.
handoff to a doctor. And then Danielle changed that. Right? When I say Danielle, I mean the new government changed that and said, hey, you know what? Let's simplify it and let's hand that person over to a nurse quickly, and then put him in whatever, and free
Get
up
them
some
back out.
get him back out, get the driver back out. And then
Yeah.
people got upset. They go, well, that's unfair, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, whoa, hang on one second. What would happen if I showed up at the hospital with my son with a broken arm? Do I have to do I have to wait there for 12 hours until a doctor sees him? Or like, you're expecting a better service from the ambulance driver than I would get as a private citizen. So,
Right.
it's an example. So I think that Danielle is smart enough. That's how she's going to manage that. There's going to be some transformation at Alberta Health, but it's not, people who are worried about their jobs are still going to keep their jobs. Nobody's going to lose their jobs. Now, in
Mm-hmm.
other departments, in other groups, yeah, they'll lose their jobs because they're doing a useless job in some organizations. But again, in Alberta, we don't need like brutal austerity measures. We have plenty of work. We just, people are going to be upset because they lose their cushy job. Well, I'm not going to lose sleep over somebody who's upset about losing their cushy job. There's plenty of work in this province. So
Yeah.
yeah. Nurses aren't going to lose their jobs. Neither are doctors, neither are ambulance drivers. Like that's a guarantee.
Well, and that's kind of the way I saw it. I thought worst case scenario when we're talking layoffs, we might see some top level people maybe, get their payouts and be on their way kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I've been saying for more than a decade that Alberta Health Services needs a restructuring. I mean, anytime you go into a hospital, anytime, like even booking a doctor right now, a family physician,
Yeah.
usually for our family, I know it's about 2 months out. And even a friend of ours who was looking for mental health counseling not too long ago, they were told it was an 18-month waiting period to speak with somebody who was covered by the province because they can't afford hundreds of dollars an hour. And I look at that going, we don't have enough resources. Like, it needs to be fixed.
Well, sure. And actually, now you're making me think of another point that I've heard Danielle talk about, and it's been popular on the radio, is the whole concept that we're, on the one hand, you got a minister in Ottawa who says we're going to bring in 1 million new immigrants. Why? Well, we're going to bring in 1 million new immigrants because we're not replacing ourselves by having kids. We need to fund our future pensions and stuff like that. Fine. So we bring in immigrants and we don't do anything to help these immigrants integrate into our society.
Right.
And then in those immigrants, we've got these great workers. Do you mean that, think of a nurse who is trained to be a nurse in China, or an engineer who is trained to be an engineer in China or in South Africa or in Brazil or in a place like that. And they come here and we make them jump through all these hoops, and it takes forever for a nurse who's certified in another country to become a nurse in Alberta. Why?
Yep.
Because in Alberta we have a nursing association, and we have unions, and we have all things that are protecting themselves, that are making it brutal for that nurse to get qualified, and they're hiding it. They're disguising it by saying, "Oh, she's not competent, or she the safety of Canadians is at risk and whatever." Bullshit. If you're a nurse in China who's learned how to change bandages and do IVs and whatever, clean up a mess and administer medication, you can do that here. What they're missing when they come here is it might be the language, and it might be the exact procedures. Oh, we don't do paper charts, we do electronic charts. Is it worth holding back a nurse from another country because she's not familiar with our computer systems? Let her side saddle with somebody for a few months. Anyways, it's just another example. There are problems that need to be solved. And we have in Alberta and across Canada, we have people that keep blocking every time somebody comes up with a solution. And that's where I'm glad to see Danielle is pushing back. She has solutions, not just her. Lots of people have solutions. And we can't have somebody say no every time there's a solution. Can't. Right. And that's where she's good. Because if you listen to what's happened in the past, every time, the only solutions that people accepted in the past was more money, money, money. Where's my hand? More money, money.
Yes.
Money ain't the solution.
Yeah. That's right. And that's one thing I'll give credit where it's due, is that with Danielle, and again, it's been discussed multiple times that she's one of the few politicians I've seen that says, here's what I'm going to do, and actually follows through with it. We've seen so much from her in less than a year than we see from most politicians over their entire career. And I guess that's one reason why when people ask me the same question as you said earlier, do you trust Danielle Smith? I don't trust her with my life, but I trust that she's making the best decisions possible. Now, until she gives me a reason to not trust what she's doing, or pulls a scandal, or gives out free heat pumps or something, then maybe we'll have a problem.
Don't go there. You know what? I mean, she's an intelligent person, and you can see it. You brought up a couple of points. I mean, it's obvious that she thinks deeply about things. Yeah. And I like that. I like that in a person, right? Think about something, don't what was the other controversy last week as an example? She went in, there's not lots, but Danielle was interviewed and then she bounced the idea that maybe we have a special certification for grade 10. So you go to grade 10 and you get a special certification. And then after that, you go immediately into the trade school. And when she proposed that, it's obvious that she had talked to people about that. She knows that that's how it's done in Poland and Germany, and she had some great answers. And that's another example. As soon as she said that, everybody's like, oh my God, you mean kids are just going to have a grade 10 education? No, they're going to have a grade 10 diploma that then lets them get into a trade school earlier, but they're going to continue their education. If you go to a trade school for 3 years, man, that's the equivalent of what, grade 13, right? So people misunderstood that. And then they're trying to make all sorts of excuses. Oh, you're introducing people into the workforce too quickly. It's like, holy shit, man. We have a problem that we don't have people. We don't have people in the workforce. So let us solve some problems, right? And so when she was talking like that, it was nice to listen to her, and you can tell that she's thought about things. Now that's the first point. The second point is she's good at doing things. I can tell that. I can imagine what it looks like in her cabinet. It would be very similar and refreshing. It probably looks like when I worked in industry. When I worked in industry, and we had to build a bridge. We'd get around the room and I'd say, Derek, you do the drawings. Bob, you get this. Larry, you do that. And then, 2 years later, the bridge was built. In modern Canadian government, even some people can't navigate it anymore. It's so freaking complicated. So I think she's good at navigating the machine and making the machine work. Because for a lot of, that's a good and bad thing, by the way. I mean, luckily, there's politicians in Ottawa that I'm glad they can say whatever they want. And I go, whatever. You're never going to get it done. So it's too complicated,
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're really bragging about Danielle here. Danielle, if you're listening, we like the work you're doing.
She'll definitely get some
obvious,
praise.
We like the work you're doing.
She'll get some praise next week for sure. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know you're not physically in Calgary's city limits, but you're close enough. What's your opinion on this $2.2 million statue that's getting built?
Well,
I think I know the answer to that, but I just
yeah,
thought I'd
no, I'm
explain
not
it.
in favor of it.
No.
That's a, I
And then an
I'm not in.
engineer who's not in favor of fancy artwork from another
No,
part of
no,
the
you know
world?
what? I mean, okay, it's a complicated answer. So for that
Yeah,
piece of work, no, I'm not in favor of it. Okay,
right.
I'm not in favor of that piece of work at this time. I mean, when Gondek announces that there might be an 8% increase in tax rates, I would go, okay, we got to prioritize a couple of things. And so I'm not in favor of the timing of that artwork. I'm also
Right.
not in favor of the city going about and buying just artwork. I think, it's not the core deliverable that I want from my city. Plow
Right.
my streets, do the other stuff,
Yes.
facilitate other people getting artwork. So, yes, is there a nice, as an engineer, I look at the Bow Tower, and in front of the Bow Tower, there's that beautiful head, right?
The head sculpture, yep.
Is that private? Yes, it's private. Is it part of Calgary? Yes. Was it facilitated by the city? Perhaps. And that I like that. Do
Yeah.
I like the Peace Bridge? I do. Was it
Yeah.
controversial? Sure it was. But
Yep.
does a piece of architecture have to be just an ugly bridge across the river? No, it can be pretty and be artwork. Do I like some of the C train stations that are nicely decorated, where in part of the C train station you might have a $20,000 piece of artwork done by a local artist? Yes, let's do it that way.
Yes.
But do I want a Spanish artist bringing me, what was the one a few years ago?
Oh, the
The
blue ring?
Beaufort Tower. No, the Beaufort. I
Oh,
mean, everybody knows the blue ring, but the
yeah.
Beaufort Tower, like, is the I-beam sticking out by COP with the rocks across them. We
Yes.
don't even know what it means. I can't even get close to it to analyze it. I can't even
Right.
do a good picture because of where it's located. So yeah. So I'm not against art. I'm certainly not against a city looking beautiful and organized, but is this the
Mhm.
time for what is the budget on this one?
2.2.
And it's ugly, right? Between you and me, it looks like
Yeah, it looks so again, I know the model was 3D printed, but even
yeah.
still I look at it and go, come on. Like my issue is that at a time when again, people are struggling, businesses are struggling, especially when it comes to carbon tax and what they're paying just for product, let alone their staff and to keep the lights on.
Yep.
The mayor's going to go, it feels like flaunting money around. And people always say, hey, look, there's a portion of the city's budget that gets moved into art projects. That's part of the deal. And I can say, okay, fine. But to announce that days before you announce, hey, I'm going to raise taxes 8%, while crime's at the highest it's probably been in ages. Uh, people
She-
can't afford to feed themselves. Food banks are empty. Shelters are full. What are we doing? Right?
she's tone deaf on this one. I agree. I mean, you and I were both at the march for the children there back in was that a September or October? Man,
September.
time flies.
Yeah,
September.
September.
And she didn't come out of there. She didn't make an
No.
appearance. She basically locked, barricaded herself. Well, I mean, I'm no fan of Jody Gondek. I have no idea how you guys elected her. I have no idea. But
Oh, we didn't.
I agree with you. The timing on this one is poor. And even
Yeah.
if it was the right timing, I still don't think it should be like a Spanish or a foreign artist. I mean, spend the money locally, do it wisely. Putting an
Yeah.
ugly sculpture in the middle of nowhere, she is tone deaf. Actually, if you think about it, I mean, Calgary has a bad history when it comes to public art. Like, it's if she's hoping to change opinions with this one, I don't know who's advising her. It's not a good strategy.
It's one of those things that I feel like like you said, I'd rather we have so much talent in the city. When
Yeah,
it comes to engineers, we have one of the best engineering facilities in the country. We at the UFC, we have fabulous artistry and technological
but
designers. Like, why can't we find somebody here and
yeah,
showcase their work?
totally.
Like I sometimes mention, I don't know if you remember in the late 90s when they did those cow statues across town. And a lot of people had mixed feelings on them, but I thought it was kind of neat because, Calgary's always called Cowtown. And it
Yeah.
was funny to see people, dole them up and then sell them off to charity. Uh, ultimately, I'd like to see something not the same as that, but something similar where it's like it showcases what Calgary is and not what Sweden or Denmark or the UK or any of those places are, like
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree. I mean, most cities, in fact, in the world are not known for an art work. Art is known. Museums are known for their art. Cities are known for their architecture. I mean, if you want to make a mark, it's the Eiffel Tower, the Leaning Tower of Pisa, the World Trade Center. Buildings are, and Calgary's got some pretty cool buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, an interesting one. Definitely bad timing all around. I mean, I'm not in favor of what this is all about. Like, yeah, not in favor. Not in favor. I mean, you guys are that an 8% tax rate. Holy smokes, man. That's ridiculous.
Well, and it's funny because like as soon as I mentioned it, like people said, it was somebody in my comments on the video I posted yesterday were saying, it's only $16 a month. And I say, well, yeah, but I work for that $16 and I pay tax on that $16 and I work too hard for any portion of that money to give it to the city to throw away on the nonsense that they spend it on.
It's like the example I did on the carbon tax. People, I hate when people say that it's only $16. I go $16. I'm going to round it up to $20 to make the math easier. In 12 months, it's $250. And so, and if you're faced with an extra $250, you only have three choices. Either you cut, because we all have limited money, right? We're all spending everything we earn. So if you hit me with $250 expense, I have three choices. I cancel the $250 expense, which means my son doesn't get a new pair of winter boots. Or I go to my boss and say, I want a $250 raise, and he's going to laugh because he's been hit by the $250 expense as well.
Yeah.
Or I can try and earn it through my investments. And so to make $250 in a year, I'm going to do the math in my head, but you need about, you need $6,000 in the bank, making 5%. That would be $300. Well, I can't even save money to get the 6,000 in the bank.
Right.
So forget about it. And then the 250, if I'm not spending it on somebody, that's somebody else who's not going to get it. And
that's right.
No. So anybody who says, oh, it's only $16, no, bullshit. It's got a cascading cost and it ripples through, and it's a lot of money that comes out of the economy because of that $16.
Well, and that was one of the things that I brought up too, is that even though it's $16 for us, like they were saying, for business owners, it could go as high as $300 extra a month. For the average business, now when we're talking like Walmarts or Home Depots, they don't care about $300 a month. But when you're talking like brick and mortar, mom and pop, the average person who's got a retail outlet, $300 extra every month adds on when you're paying for staff, when you're paying for lights, when you're paying for product and overhead and shrinkage. And especially these days, I imagine shrinkage is at an all-time high, but we've already got one of the highest vacancy rates in Canada in our downtown core. An extra $300 a month might cripple some businesses to the point where it gets even higher.
Well, I mean, cities should be cutting costs as much as possible. Any city, like, it's irresponsible at this point for a city to even to raise taxes with inflation. That's already irresponsible because inflation's been driven to a ridiculously high number artificially because of bad government policies. So, I saw a study by MNP, Myers, Norris, Penny, whatever. They do this study every so often, and I think the average household in Canada right now every month is about $200 from a complete panic, a complete breakdown. So no families can't afford an unexpected $200 expense. That's it. So that's not a good point. So if somebody gets a flat tire and the tire is irreparable and they got to buy a brand new tire for $400, that's going to put almost every family in Calgary in a deficit for that month. So Canadians are living paycheck to paycheck to paycheck. We got inflation that's out of control. The Bank of Canada keeps saying, oh, it's only 3.8%. Bullshit, is 3.8%. I talked to my wife. I mean, my wife knows the prices of groceries intimately, and she'll say that pound of butter was $4.99 and the pound of butter this year is $6.29. She can do the math in her head, go, that's 20%. So inflation is high. And we need, and I've always said this, the governments are the biggest drivers of inflation. There's nobody else that drives inflation like government. And so I don't think the 8% raise will go through. That's my gut feeling, but we'll see. If you guys get hit by an 8% increase in your taxes, wow, that outpaces inflation. And
well, And somebody had a good point where they said, this is always the plan when it comes to mayors. And then she did the same thing where it's a high raise one year. It's never been 8%, but it's a higher raise. And then next year, as they go into an election year, they say, well, we're not going to tax this year because they're trying to buy up their votes, right? So it's kind of they give you a double whammy one year and then seem like they're giving you the easy way out the
Yeah.
next year. I mean, we've seen it in politics across Canada again with heat pumps and buying votes and things. And but I still think 8% is just such a ludicrous number, especially like people used to complain when Nenshi would raise like 3.5.
Yep.
And that's where I start going like 8% at one of the times that we have the highest inflation in 35 years.
Yep.
It doesn't make any sense to me. And it's I'm no economist, but when you look at the money that's wasted in a city budget or a provincial budget or a federal budget, when you cut out unnecessary programs, when you cut out unnecessary staff, just like you were talking about with AHS, when you trim the fat and find some efficiency experts that say we could save X amount of money if we just stop doing all this useless stuff, you wouldn't need to raise taxes. In fact, you could probably give some money back to people at the end of the day.
Well, I mean, we could push this to an extreme. I agree. I agree. Even provincially, like there's 8 jurisdictions in North America that don't pay income tax. There's no income tax in Alaska, Texas, North Dakota. I can't remember the other ones, but and so we're focused on the one hand, we're demolishing the money generating side of our economy. So we got these green freaks that are trying to hinder oil and gas developments and energy development and other things. And then on the other hand, we also have these ridiculous out of control spending. We're spending on absolutely crazy stuff. I mean, I comment on that all the time. Like all the time. Like just as an example, it's a funny example, but I did go, I was hiking this weekend and I go by a Parks Canada cabin, and it's a Parks Canada cabin in the freaking middle of nowhere. And there's warning labels on it. And there's even an infographic on how to change the poop barrel in the outhouse. And and as I'm videotaping this, I made a comment. I'm like, hey, think about it, folks. Somebody in the government somewhere is paid to do an infographic on how to change a poop barrel in an outhouse. Yeah. So that's our government's, right? But what I was going to say is, we don't need austerity, and we wouldn't even be in this position. We shouldn't even be in this position if we had people that would let us develop our resources. I mean, God, Alberta could double its oil production, which would still only provide about 1/10 of what the world needs. And we could give ourselves beautiful hospitals and beautiful artwork and all sorts of things. I mean, as an example, Qatar, folks. Qatar hosted the World Cup last year. And you know how much the World Cup cost? It was a $2 billion boondoggle. They spoiled themselves with a $2 billion party, and they don't even tax their citizens. Like, and there you go. So it can be done, right? Especially here.
Yeah.
Like there's God. Yeah.
Well, and I remember that being the discussion in the early 2000s when people were talking about, potential things like Keystone and saying, if we just start getting our product to market, we could be the next Saudi Arabia. You'd see people driving Ferraris up and down the streets and there'd be more cash flow. And I don't think it would go that high, but it would be good living. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see a government that wants to push its own product to market and make sure that its citizens are looked after. And again, when it comes to Danielle, that's one thing I feel, at least somewhat secure with her that she's got our best interests at heart.
Well,
at least the most that we've seen lately. But
and then she understands some of these things. I mean, I don't know how I'm going to spin this one, but while like the environmentalists, for instance, wanted to cancel the oil projects, and in doing so, they scared away investment. But what they did by doing that is they also killed whatever project they might want to do, because now and they're waking up to that reality. So you scared away the investors because they didn't want, they came here and then they said, yeah, we'd love to build a pipeline. We scared them away. Now we want the investors to come back to build whatever it is. Maybe it's housing, maybe it's windmills, maybe it's solar farms. And the investors are saying, no, we're not investing in Canada. So the green guys, they succeeded in killing the industry that they wanted to kill, but they also succeeded in killing their own industries and their own futures. So
Yeah.
and that's where also once in a while, politics and democracy is a scary thing, right? Democracy is the will of the people, but an extreme is where a government ignores the people, and then for bad reasons. But there's also an extreme where once in a while the government should ignore the people for good reasons. And so when the people start making absolutely ridiculous requests of the government does have a job to at least try to educate the people and let them know why their idea is stupid. And then if they don't agree, head in the right direction. I'm rambling now. I mean,
No, not at all.
I'm hoping for too much out of governments is what I'm hoping right now.
Well,
Again,
time's gonna tell, and we'll see what comes forward. But Marty,
Yeah.
it's been a pleasure sitting here talking with you, and kind of catching up on Alberta, because again, anytime I watch you on Clyde's channel, it's always the country we're talking about. Sometimes it's great to sit down and talk about Alberta, where it's a little less stressful. So thanks so much for coming on the show.
No, I love talking about Alberta, and awesome. Thanks for having me on the show. Anytime, man. Anytime.
And yeah, we'll have you back definitely in the future, Marty. Thanks again for coming on, ladies and gentlemen. Marty Up North. Once again, everybody, I hope you guys enjoyed this sit down with Marty. It was great to sit down. We had some great talking points, and Marty, I mean, like I said at the beginning of this, always has some fantastic opinions, and I'm always happy to hear what he's got to say. Make sure to send him a follow over on Twitter. You can find him over at Marty. What is it here? Marty Up North. His Marty Up North account got banned. Let me pull that for you guys really quick. Just so I should have had this ready. I apologize, folks. At MartyUpNorth _2. You can find Marty over on Twitter. Go give him a follow. And not that he needs the help, but ladies and gentlemen, he's got great opinions and he's always good to hear from. And thanks so much for coming on the channel. I look forward to catching you guys on the next one. Take care. Have a great weekend. We'll see you later.